Welcome. Welcome to the 8 p.m. advisory update on Hurricane Beryl. Hurricane Beryl continues to churn in the northwestern Caribbean Sea with its rendezvous date with the Yucatan Peninsula coming up early Friday morning, possibly before 7 or 8 a.m. here. So we have the Yucatan Peninsula here that's going to be affected by this hurricane. Hurricane Beryl looks a little bit better organized as it makes its initial approach into the Yucatan Peninsula here. And this is of the 8 p.m. advisory. We have a next advisory coming in at 11 p.m. I'm bringing you the update. Right now, it's about 180 miles east-southeast of Tulum, Mexico, with max sustained winds of 110 miles an hour. Minimum central pressure is currently holding at 974 millibars. We have a reconnaissance plane in there right now, and of course, they'll bring us the latest updates on this system as it continues to churn toward the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, it'll cover this ground tonight. And we have it coming into the Yucatan Peninsula early tomorrow morning. It'll cross over into the Gulf of Mexico in a fairly short time. And then from there, that's where the consensus models has it bringing into northern Mexico or southern Texas, to give you the summary here. But this storm continues to defy all odds here. It's fighting off a lot of wind shear. It's in the zone of a lot of wind shear right now. And it has managed to fight that off pretty well, considering it was a major hurricane about 48 hours ago. And now it's down to Category 2 and possibly Category 1 as it makes its initial approach into the Yucatan Peninsula. So places like Playa del Carmen, Tulum, Cancun, Quintana Roo, all those places need to be on the lookout and be on guard. All the preparations should be done. Hurricane preparations, of course, should be made, which I'm sure many down there have already done, as the hurricane warning is in effect. Belize, there's more and more northern Belize that you're mostly out of this thing. I don't think you'll experience any of the tropical storm force winds. You may get a few rain showers and things of that nature in northern Belize, but that's about it. It's mostly a northern Mexico, Yucatan Peninsula affair as of this moment. Now, you can see the tropical storm force winds are more loaded on the eastern and northeastern side of this system. It's very lopsided, and the movement is sped up a little bit. Now it's west-northwest at 20 miles an hour. Before it was west-northwest at 18 miles an hour as it makes its initial approach into the Yucatan Peninsula. And so we can also see here with this track, it has sort of shifted a little bit further north now. It's to the border, the Rio Grande Valley of Texas and the northern Mexico border with the United States. And so this means that the consensus models have shown that the track continues to be shifted more towards the lower Texas, northern Mexico border. So places like McAllen, Harrigan, Texas, Brownsville, Texas, Corpus Christi, Texas, places like that are more into play as time goes on. Now, what's happening with the atmospheric dynamics? We have a high pressure system up above the southeast U.S. that is directing the system, and the storm is moving around the outer periphery of that. Now, this high pressure system is weakening, and the models are picking up on that. And what that means is the high pressure is going to weaken and shift further east. As it does that, the clockwise rotation of the high pressure steering it will also cause the storm to turn northwest, then eventually north like this into either Texas coastline, or just a piece of Louisiana, or that's where the models are having the confusion at. But right now, the model's consensus is that it comes into northern Mexico and it skirts along the Texas coast like this before finally making landfall somewhere north of Corpus Christi, Victoria, Port Lavaca, Texas, something like that is what the consensus model is showing here. Now, on the regular models, I'm going to show you the other tracks here. This is more so the GFS, the big models, the GFS, Euro, and all of that. They have it coming into northern Mexico and then riding along the border of Texas and Mexico. So those places still be affected. McAllen, Brownsville, Harrigan, Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, and then pulling up into the Red Hills of Texas up towards Austin and all of that. Now, in all of these scenarios, this is far out. The farther out you go, the less certain the models are. Like I said, 4 or 5 days out, it's a little more less certain. We're uncertain of the intensity. We do know that it's going to come into the Bay of Campeche as a tropical storm because it's going to be weakening as it goes over the Yucatan Peninsula early tomorrow morning. So whatever emerges in the Gulf is going to be a tropical storm. Question is how strong it's going to be when it gets up towards the Texas coastline. Right now, the models are saying possibly a Category 1 hurricane. It's not out of the question that this can get up to a strong Category 2, borderline Category 3 hurricane. According to the model guidance, that is possible. But there's strong wind shear in the Gulf of Mexico right now coming in from the northeast, like that, coming across the system. And if that doesn't subside, despite the high weakening and moving east, then we'll have a weaker system. If we have a weaker system, it's going to stay further south, like the models have predicted. But if we have a stronger system, then look out. That means that puts more and more of the northern Texas coast, into play. Now that will be from Port Victoria up to Houston, Beaumont, and Lake Charles, Louisiana. They will possibly come into play. We'll know more of that, possibly know more of that tomorrow. I would say tomorrow by the 5 p.m. advisory tomorrow is going to be very important in terms of the direction of this system. So once that comes out, the 5 p.m. advisory tomorrow, we'll see how far east this thing shifts. But it looks to me as if it's continuing to shift further east here in terms of the track here. And you can see that on the thing here. Before, if you remember the earlier models, it was more so a northern Mexico event. Now, a lot more of Texas is expanded here. Coastline real estate is expanded in this track as we get 72 hours out from the landfall, from the previous landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula. So that means that not only is this high pressure system eroding and moving further east to allow the Beryl to come up into the Gulf and pull northwestward, but also that also means that we're going to have a stronger system here at some point, possibly on Saturday afternoon, before it makes that turn to the northwest and then finally north into the Texas coastline or Louisiana coastline. It could be that. Then that means that we're going to have a stronger system on our hands at some point. Now, that may not be, I'm not saying a major hurricane, but I'm saying at least a Category 1 or 2 hurricane, possibly getting up to a Category 3, as so many storms have done before in the Gulf. Just before they hit landfall, they undergo like a rapid intensification, maybe about 5 or 6 hours before landfall, and it ends up being a major hurricane. That is not out of the question. We've seen that time and time again because there's still high water heat content in the Gulf. The Gulf water temperatures are 83, 84 degrees Fahrenheit. That's plenty of heat to overcome wind shear and to overcome the atmospheric conditions that this system will be facing once it regroups. The key is going to be what type of structure comes off the coast of the Yucatan. If it's lopsided, if this visible satellite shows you, right now it looks as if the eye, you can see the eye is starting to reform a little bit. You see a little bit of clear eye there in the last frame there, coming back just a little bit, ever so slightly. So if the system is going through an ERC, an eyewall replacement cycle, then it will weaken slightly, obviously, to a Category 1 as it approaches the Yucatan, which models have already agreed upon that. So we get that. So when it comes to the Yucatan, it may be 100 miles an hour, 95 miles an hour at its core. Okay, everybody else will get tropical storm winds across the Yucatan. Then when it gets up into the Bay of Campeche, that's when right here, that's when if we come out with a tropical storm, ladies and gentlemen, that's around, all you need is a tropical storm around 50 to 60 miles an hour. That's a pretty healthy tropical storm if it survives. But the key is that this area is not mountainous. It's not going over mountains. It's just going over land. So the land interaction, yes, it's a pretty good piece of real estate here. I don't know how big the Yucatan Peninsula is. Maybe it's let's say across here it's maybe 100 miles, maybe conservatively 120 miles or so across. So it's not going over land for that amount, a huge amount of time. Not moving at the speed it does. It's moving at west-northwest at 20. So it's going to cover this ground fairly fast here. From 2 p.m. Friday to 2 a.m. Saturday, it's already reemerged. It'll be reemerged off the coast by later Friday night. So let's say it reemerges off the coast at according to this data point, I'm just going to use this data point here. Let's say it reemerges off the coast at 10 p.m. Friday, just after the 8 p.m. advisory. Okay, so that gives it plenty of real estate, to work with here in the Bay of Campeche. So that's why the Hurricane Center already has it as a hurricane coming into a Cat 1 or so hurricane. Could be a Cat 3 or Cat 2, possibly coming north. But it just depends on the angle at which it turns. Now, if it comes in at a weird angle, and that means that, that it's more on this side of the cone, the right side of the cone, then obviously that means that all this stuff here is going to shift east, and I suspect that it will. But I don't want to get ahead of anything because, like I said, I don't want to make those calls right now until after we see the structure of it coming out of the Yucatan. What kind of structure do we have remaining? What kind of storm do we have remaining? And so that's what we're going to have going on here. Once again, the consensus track does take it into southern Texas. So we're talking about Brownsville, Horrigan, McAllen, Port Lavaca, Victoria, Texas, places like that, South Padre Island, all those places need to be in high alert, because regardless of whether or not this comes in as a tropical storm or a hurricane or a tropical depression, you're going to get a lot of rain, because you're going to be on that northeast side of the system here, this side where all of this rain is at, this place here. So you're going to get a lot of rains, and you know that area is prone to flooding. South Padre Island, Brownsville, McAllen, that area is prone to flooding, and so they're going to get that, and that's all the way up the coast. So from even up to Victoria and Port Lavaca and Galveston and Houston, that whole side of the Texas coastline is prone to flooding. Even all the way over to Lake Charles, Louisiana, that can't be ruled out. Those areas are prone to flooding. Cameron. So I would be prepared just in case. Make my preparation starting Sunday afternoon at the latest for a possible rainfall impact that's going to cause flooding impacts. Because you got to remember, ladies and gentlemen, this thing is going to slow down. Once it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, it's not going to be moving at west-northwest at 20 miles an hour. And it's projected to slow down possibly sometime Saturday night into Sunday morning. That's the period. That's the critical period right there that this Hurricane Beryl, or whatever's left of it, I'm sorry, right here we're going to say Tropical Storm Beryl for right now, because we don't know what's going to be left of it, but Tropical Storm Beryl is going to be slowing down when it gets in the Bay of Campeche Saturday afternoon into Sunday, as it makes that turn northwestward and northward into wherever it goes, northern Mexico or the east coast of Texas. So that's why people are saying, and that's why many of the forecasters are saying that Texas and southern Texas and even the middle eastern Texas on the eastern shoreline need to prepare for flooding rains, because that's the worst case scenario, is that this is going to be a flooding event. It's not so much the winds, it's going to be a flooding and a storm surge event, possibly, if that right front quadrant comes in and just keeps throwing rain like this across the coast of Texas here, the southern and middle part coast of Texas here. And so that's the main concern. As you know, most hurricanes, yes, the winds are important, but most people get in trouble with the storm surge and the flooding rain. So now back to the system here, you can see also too, and you have to remember too that just a storm surge. Let's say it comes in as a Cat 1 or a Cat 2. Yeah, the storm surge is not nothing huge. We're not talking Katrina storm surge. I don't mean to scare anybody. We're not talking a 20-foot storm surge with a Category 1 or 2. But we still are talking a water level rise of at least 4 to 8 feet, guaranteed, if that right front quadrant comes in. Anywhere between Corpus Christi, Port Howard, Brownsville, McAllen. You're still talking that right front quadrant coming in if it makes landfall somewhere along the border, right on the border as this has depicted. You're still talking a 4 to 8 feet water rise that could cause a lot of problems in South Padre Island and other places as well. So, and even if it comes in, let's say it comes in the worst case scenario, ladies and gentlemen, let's say it comes in on the right. Let's say it misses all this altogether. Let's say the high pressure weakens and moves way east, and let's say the steering currents bring it closer to the Houston, Galveston, Beaumont area, which a lot of people are thinking. Now, if it does that, then that means that the storm surge will be into Louisiana, Lake Charles, Cameron, Louisiana, much like the other system, that hurricane that we had a couple years ago. I think it was Laura that came in, and that's when the storm surge was east of that. But still, Houston would be on the west side, the weaker side, the Galveston Bay, League City, and all that. They would be on the weaker side, the western side, but they still would experience a lot of damages. Now, if it comes in west of the Galveston Bay, Houston area, let's say it comes in over here toward Victoria and all of that, Texas, then that means that Houston would be on the east side, and they would get a lot of storm surge into the Galveston Bay, and they could possibly be 4 to 9 feet. That would be the worst case scenario if the storm lifts even further north than what they had to pick it here, and it comes in, let's say, at Victoria, Texas, or something like that. That puts Houston, Galveston, League City, Bay City, Galveston Island on the east side of that storm surge, and all that water pushes into the bay. It won't be a huge thing if it's not a major hurricane, or if it's not a if it's a tropical storm, it wouldn't be so bad. This would be flooding rains for Houston and everything like that. But even that's dangerous, because Houston floods out, like on the slightest thing. If you get more than 5 inches of rain, Houston and those areas, those freeways are going to be flooded. So that's what we're looking at, but that's later on down the road. So that's why I say Saturday is the critical day for the models. And there's 3 scenarios that's happening right now. The first scenario that I told you about a couple of hours ago is playing out right now, that the storm is going to, of course, hit Yucatan, get up into the Gulf, and then start making that slow northwest to north turn. And the high pressure weakens. We talked about that already. The next phase is going to be for it to come. The next phase is going to be for it to come into the Gulf and come north up in this area right here. So I anticipate the storm to, in the next advisory that we get at 11 p.m., I anticipate the Hurricane Center to just weaken it slightly to 105 maybe, and the pressure should come up just slightly, ever so slightly. We're seeing the eye reform here on satellite. here, just a little bit here, more visible here on the visible satellite. You can see the center of circulation right there at the last frame, just reform and regenerate just a little bit, and we see those convection bands still affecting Cuba and Pinarda, Rio, Cuba, the little island there, and everything. Cayman Islands is clear now. Everybody else, the warnings have been dropped for them, so they've had their time, and everything is good there as well, as far as we know. And so now it's the Yucatan's time. And so, like I said, they'll get some storm surge on the Yucatan Peninsula too, as well, up on the order of 4 to 8 feet or 9 feet on that tip, on that northern tip there of the Yucatan Peninsula. They'll get that storm surge, and all of that will come in early tomorrow morning, Friday morning here, possibly, I don't know, whatever makes landfall, 9 p.m. or something, 9 a.m. I'm sorry. So that's what we're looking at. But once again, as you can see, the model consensus here. Once again, I want to show you. Once again, even if it comes in northern Mexico, that still puts the southern tip of Texas in that eastern quadrant that's going to have all the rains, all the dirty side, all the flooding, storm surge, and all that things that's going to be coming into Brownsville, McAllen, Harlingen. And so that's what we're very concerned about, because the models are agreeing on that. Now, if it takes the further right track here, like that, like I said, if it comes in over here, then that still brings a lot of problems for this Texas coastline up there. But now the biggest thing is, I think the track is locked down, but what most people are really concerned about is the intensity forecast, and that's been kind of hard to pinpoint with this storm Beryl, because even though we have negative factors of wind shear and dry air entrainment, it's just still not, it's not lining up correctly what you would normally see from a Gulf of Mexico storm at this time of year in July. And so that's what we have going on with Beryl here. You can see also that we don't have any other additional warnings yet for Texas and all of that yet. So we don't have the warnings. I suspect that will come probably when it comes off the coast of the Yucatan. So they'll make the warnings here. If you look at the chart here, they'll start issuing warnings here probably on Saturday. At some point on Saturday, the Hurricane Center will begin issuing hurricane watches or warnings for the southern Texas coast and the northern Mexico coast, because everybody's waiting to see like I said, what type of structures coming off the Yucatan the storm has, and if the storm slows down, and what type of direction is this thing going. Is it going to continue to go northwest, or is it going to go west into Mexico completely, as some of the models have suggested, or is it going to continue to ride northwest and don't make that turn and just come straight into Texas, full frontal on, So there's a couple of different scenarios, and we will have a firmer grip on that, obviously, when it gets into the Gulf. All bets are off until it gets into the Gulf, because actually there's even a chance, if the wind shear is strong enough, there's a chance that this thing could actually just, kind of like, disintegrate and just become a tropical storm and come in as a low-end tropical storm back into Mexico itself. And as I'll show you down the chart here, there's a chance that this thing could actually, which is highly unlikely, it's a 10% chance, but there is a chance that it can just, continue to go northwest and go into Mexico and miss Texas altogether and just go into Mexico as a tropical storm, and then of course it'll run into all the mountains down here, and that'll be it, But that chance is very low right now, given the atmospheric conditions, the blocking high, and all that ahead of it that we know. So, but still, there's a 10% chance that can happen. It's not entirely out of the question here, especially since the dynamics that we have. So the consensus is that South Texas, northern Mexico, and possibly up to Houston, Galveston, and Lake Charles, I'm not ready to rule them out yet, because I know how these Gulf systems are. And, if the high pressure is totally eroded and weakening, and so the steering currents are weakening, that means that this thing is going to be stronger and it's heading further north and northeastward than we originally had anticipated it to be. So that's why I said on Saturday afternoon, Houston, Galveston, League City, Victoria, Corpus Christi, you guys need to be watching this storm seriously starting on Saturday, because whatever emerges from the Gulf, if it's a stronger storm, if you look up and see it's a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm, you might need to be on alert. If it comes out the Bay of Campeche, comes out of here, and it comes out that, and it comes out to be like a 30 mile-an-hour tropical storm, or 35, barely a minimal tropical storm, then you might not have too much to worry about, because that means that the system structure is just not going to survive. It'll just end up being a mid-grade tropical storm going into Mexico, basically northern Mexico or something like that. But if it's a stronger storm coming off this Yucatan Peninsula, then that something is up. You might want to start getting prepared, because a stronger storm means it's going to pull further north, and that also means not only is it going to pull further north, but it's going to pull it's going to pull further north of this cone, but it means it's going to, impact Texas coastline specifically, So that's what we have going on here with the system here. Well, I just want to show you this update. We'll get the next update at 11 p.m. Eastern time, and then on that update, we expect the pressures to come up a little bit more and the winds to come down. The winds to come up a little bit more, probably to 105 miles an hour. They may keep it at 110, but if the pressure comes up to 976 millibars, they might drop it. They may move up the winds to 105, 100 to be like a low end category 2 or something like that. But it's forecast to be a category 1 when it hits the Yucatan. So we'll see how they play that, how the Hurricane Center plays that. But it looks to me like the convection looks good, but it still looks terrible satellite presentation here in terms of inflow and outflow, and there's a lot of dry air entrainment on the eastern side as well. So I don't know. I'm not sure what they're going to do, how they're going to play it, but I think right now that the hurricane force winds, as a matter of fact, hurricane force winds only extend out. They've been extending out since the storm began, only 35 to 40 miles. It's still down to 30 miles. So it's 30 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds have shrunk from 185 miles to 160 miles from the center, and so they may play it like that. A buoy out there reported sustained winds of 56 miles and a gust of 65, so that's tropical storm force. So the pressure right now is at 974. We think the pressure will rise up to 977 on the next advisory, and that should put it within low end category 2, borderline category 1, really. And so they'll probably keep the winds at 100, 105, and then in the morning they'll probably drop it at the 5 a.m. one. They'll probably drop it to about what is category 1, 96 to 111, 96 to 1 something. They'll probably drop it to about 100 exactly, and that'll be a category 1 hurricane coming into the Yucatan. So that's what I have for you today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next